Welcome to The Fine Print, the podcast where we explore the law, its impact, and the people who shape it. I'm your host, Rudell, and today I'm delighted to welcome Ms. Diya Kumar, a Cambridge educated lawyer and founder of Legal Lux, a boutique firm with a specialization in fashion and luxury law. She advises top brands, agencies, and creators on intellectual property, brand protection, contracts, and influencer and celebrity agreements, blending sharp legal expertise with insider industry insight. Beyond practice, she's an educator and thought leader, creating content that empowers others to navigate the intersection of law, business, and fashion. With her unique blend of experience and vision, she's truly shaping the future of fashion law. So, Ms. Kumar, let's begin with your journey. What initially drew you to fashion and luxury law, and what keeps you interested in this field?
Well, Rudell, my journey into fashion law, it wasn't planned at all. See, I didn't grow up knowing that there is a field called fashion law out there because it's a common knowledge that fashion law is not something that is taught in law schools out there, even till date. So it so happened that, when I was in law school, I made a Google search, late night Google search, and I came across that, okay, there's a thing called fashion law. But then just that, the Google search established only the fact that there is a field called fashion law. But of course, there's a backstory to it. What drove me to make that Google search? That has to be my love for fashion. It's storytelling, it's culture, and the fact that a single garment can carry so much history, identity, and memory. And ever since I got into law school, I have been someone who truly and genuinely enjoyed the structure of law. So when I realized that both these worlds could merge, it felt like this perfect fit, a fit made in heaven, right? So, yes, that realization turned into this curiosity that I got hooked to. And see, the journey wasn't as easy. When I first started, there were not many resources out there. People were still contemplating whether we need this designated field called fashion law, like how we have, say, sports law, media law. But I did everything that I could. I studied everything I could. I read everything that I could. I wrote about topics that generally no one was even talking about at that time. I then went to pursue my master's from the University of Cambridge with specialization in IP. And slowly, I built my practice through my law firm, Legal Lux, and my platform, Your Fashion Law Guide. So you see that for me, fashion law was definitely not just a decision. It was that moment where two sides of what I have realized that I was back then finally met. And of course, there is so much into this field that keeps me hooked. Fashion is something that is ever evolving. And automatically, fashion law is also something that is ever evolving, right? Social media, influencers, sustainability, digital fashion, these are certain terms that were unheard of few decades ago. And when today we see that so much is happening, it is evolving so fast, there are new areas that are coming up every single day. Of course, the legal question also arises. And no 2 days look the same. My journey so far, my professional journey so far, I have realized one thing. Every day I wake up, the day has something else to offer. One day I could be working on, say, contracts, another day on IP enforcement, and next day on some negotiations or something related to digital IP that I or you might not have even heard of. And I'm someone who truly believes that fashion law is one of the few legal fields where law has to keep up with the culture.
Thank you for sharing how you got interested in fashion law and just demonstrating your pure passion for fashion and how that ultimately led you to pursue a career in fashion law and building your brand and building your name all kind of stems from this passion, as well as how this field of law is, as you mentioned, ever evolving. And I definitely agree that lawyers have to keep up with the trends and the changes in fashion law. So, from your experience, what's one thing people outside this field often underestimate or perhaps don't realize about this area of law?
I really love this question. I'll tell you why. Because it's not just the outsiders that have misconceptions with respect to fashion law. Even people in legal field today are so unaware that this field specifically, there are so many myths and so many misconceptions around there. But you know what? Firstly and foremostly, the biggest misconception is, in my opinion, that most people think that fashion law is just about glamour and it is only superficial. But in reality, it's extremely, extremely operational and strategic. Okay, what we fail to acknowledge is that a lot of work happens behind these scenes and long before it reaches the public eye. I think it involves so much, like there's risk management, structuring of contracts, protecting of brand identity, and even anticipating problems before they even arise. Secondly, I think that people also underestimate how high stakes it is. There are so many parties involved who have so much to contribute that we fail to understand the repercussions of a single poorly drafted clause, what a misregistration could cost a brand. See, what they fail to understand, all these nuances, they cost a brand far more than a lawsuit later on can, right? Fashion law, as I said, is definitely not just limited to your runways or your red carpets. I am someone who always says that fashion law is definitely about control, it's about consistency, and it is also about protecting value in this very, very fast moving industry. I know at the outset, from the outside, it looks very, very glamorous. But if you are a legal professional working in this field, you will realize what all goes behind that runway, that glamorous world. It takes so much work to make something happen. The harsh reality is the smallest details, the minutest details, if you miss upon, there is a huge price that you will have to pay. A, as a lawyer, B, as a brand owner or a creative director, there is so much at stake. So, yes, this field as such is very much understated, very much underestimated. And I hope people with the passing time, they realize that this industry has so much more to it than just glamour.
That perspective really helps clarify the realities of this field. I think just sharing a bit about the background and the behind the scenes effort in kind of creating this law field and, providing for your clients, and as well as the aspect of this being high stakes. So, how many parties kind of interplay with this field, and as well as protecting the value of this field more than just kind of delivering. So, with that in mind, are there any legal protections that new or emerging designers often overlook?
Honestly, Rudel, it's not just the new and emerging designers specifically, but designers in general. And, very understandably so. I'll tell you how, right? See, if you were to be a designer, obviously you will just be bothered with the creative side of it and to the utmost the business side of it. When it comes to the legal side of it and what all goes into the business from the legal perspective, that takes a backseat and it comes much later in their thinking. Only when, honestly, what I have seen over the years with most of my clients, they realize that they need legal help only after something has already gone south. Where is this coming from? Obviously, unawareness. People are unaware that they need legal protection as well for their businesses, especially when we talk about a field like fashion, which is a creative industry. It needs protection at every single step. One of the most common mistakes that I have encountered so far is not securing, say, your trademark protection early enough or assuming that posting something, will online will automatically give you some ownership rights. Designers, because again, they are coming from creative background. So it is understandable that they do not understand these nuances, but it costs them so much. It's their work, it's their IP. And if they do not protect it, they are at the losing end. Another very major oversight that I have encountered, I have witnessed, is the importance of the contracts. See, when we talk about the fashion industry, no, the supply chain is so big, and you tend to come into business with too many parties. And whenever you are interacting with the party to make your business happen, you need to understand that you need to have a contract in place. Okay, be it with your collaborators, be it with your manufacturers, photographers, or even friends who help you in early stages. For example, I'll give you an example. You see how influencer marketing is picking up these days. Every designer out there, be it a homegrown designer, be it a new or an emerging designer, they want to market their design line through influencer marketing, which is the common phenomena now. We know that marketing, when we say marketing, influencer marketing has overtaken your traditional methods of advertisements. We know that. But what they fail to understand, when they get an influencer on board, they need to have a contract in place. Okay, because if you do not have clear agreements, ownership of your designs or content can become so legally ambiguous. And the irony that we do not understand, the irony that we fail to understand is that the legal protection, it is the cheapest and it is the simplest at the beginning of your career, at the beginning of your designing career. But it is the most expensive once success arrives. So it's paramount, it's pertinent that you get yourself legally protected from day one before things have already gone down south. That's my belief.
It's interesting to observe this kind of difference between the creative clients that you have encountered and perhaps their lack of awareness on this subject as a whole, as well as their lack of awareness around contracts and influencer contracts and how that all contributes to some kind of legal protections that don't play into effect for them and that could actually ruin their business because they don't have any patents or protections around their trademarks or designs. So, taking that a step further, how do digital platforms, social media, or e commerce impact IP enforcement?
To begin with, I will say that your digital platforms, they have changed completely changed the scenario, the way the IP enforcement works with a whole 360 degree. On one hand, of course, they have made counterfeiting and copying so much easier and so much faster. We have all these online marketplaces where we see that, it's so much easy to counterfeit products. On the other hand, I always say that, there is always other side to the coin. Because of these marketplaces, they have also created new tools for enforcement. Okay, we need to ballpark the fact our traditional IP laws have become obsolete with all these novel concepts coming into picture now, with all these new digital platforms, social media, e-commerce. We have new novel legal issues coming into picture. And of course, our conventional IP laws are not fit any longer to deal with these issues. And because of that, the importance of these new tools for enforcement that now have come into picture become more and more helpful and important. Today, a lot of IP protection happens through, say, your platform takedowns, brand monitoring systems, and even market enforcement, rather than, of course, your traditional court proceedings. So, yes, counterfeiting and copying has become manifold due to digitalization. But of course, there are also now new tools to deal with these complications, right? That is one. Secondly, social media, in my opinion, has also blurred boundaries between, say, influencers, creators, and even consumers, which have now become part of brand ecosystem. And automatically, because of this new ecosystem that now we have in place, there are new questions that arise around usage rights, ownership, and even control. So, IP enforcement is no longer limited to your legal notices and litigation. It's also about understanding the platform policies, algorithm, and even global reach.
I think that enforcement overall is changing. As you have described, the standard kinds of legal protections don't fit this case anymore because as digitalization keeps evolving and growing, you need more kinds of protections to monitor these online platforms, as you have mentioned very effectively. So, moreover, when working with influencers or high profile personalities, what are some legal risks that may arise?
I am someone who has drafted influencer agreements from day one of my career, right? And I have come to this realization that one of the biggest risks working with influencers, and we call them HNIs also, these high profile personalities, it is misalignment. Brands and influencers, they often assume that they are on the same page. But again, the importance of contracts come into picture. Without clearly drafted contracts, I have seen that expectations can differ drastically. And more often than not, common issues they do arise, say around deliverables, timeline, usage rights, and exclusivity. Hence, the importance of a well drafted contract cannot be ignored. If you have a contract in place that clearly defines roles and obligations for both the parties, you are good to go. I have seen that happening with Zara. I have seen that happening with other brands as well. And that only makes you realize that, okay, even though your collaboration with an influencer might not be on long term basis, it would be very seasonal, very campaign specific. But for your campaign as a brand, for you to have a successful campaign, it is important that you have a contract in place. A, B, that the contract is very well drafted. Secondly, what I have seen is that another risk working with the influencers or say high profile personalities is the reputational risk. High profile personalities, they bring, of course, they bring visibility, but they also amplify risk. So it is important, again, coming back to my point, that you need to have a well drafted contract, and your well drafted contract, it needs to have morality clause, it needs to have disclosure requirement, it needs to have termination rights. And they are, believe me, they are often ignored until something goes wrong. I always say that contracts in influencer relationships are not about mistrust, but they are about clarity. So, what we need to be cautious about, what we need to know is that a well drafted agreement protects both the brand and the individual.
That really highlights the complexities of working with these high profile figures and the unique risks involved, especially considering, misalignment of the ideas or of what they're promoting and how a contract actually provides clarity to ensure that every party is on the same side. So, on a personal level, what's been the most memorable project or client in your career so far?
See, I believe that each client braces you up for the next. My most memorable project, again, it doesn't have to be a high profile client for you to make it a memorable project. I have different clients across the board, right? High profile or some new and emerging people into the industry. And every experience has been unique in its own way. And what I have realized over the span of the time is that where it's a good legal strategy that helps you prevent a major issue before it becomes public. Since we are talking about these brands, these designers, they're out there in public. And as a legal person, you need to have their back. And if you do not come up with a timely legal strategy that is going to provide them with that kind of protection, I'm sorry, you are not performing your duties, you're not performing your professional duties towards your client in an efficient and an effective way. I have seen that moments where careful drafting or timely advice has protected a brand's reputation and it has even helped me avoid a dispute entirely. And all these things, they are highly, highly rewarding. Okay, I would not want to name any of my clients very specifically, But I would, of course, tell you. So there is this new brand which is now going to be launching here in the Indian market very, very soon. Okay, and it's a high profile brand. And working with them, I have realized once you are at that level, there's so much work that goes into it. There are things that, as a legal profession, I did not even know existed. And I have seen that these brands who are at that level, they are so particular and they are so specific about their business operations that it is mind blowing. And the experience that I gauged out of it, the whatever that I learned out of it, I am sure that of course it is going to help me next time when I'm going to deal with the client of that level. So these experiences, they often reinforce that why your legal work matters so much in this industry.
That's so true. I think what you said about each experience shaping the next is so pertinent and so valuable in its own. And by having this high profile client of yours expose you to areas which are new to you as well, I think also demonstrates a way that this field is ever evolving, as we mentioned a bit earlier. So, on that note, how do negotiations differ when you're working with luxury brands versus corporate clients?
See, as I said, luxury brands are, they tend to be very, very peculiar about things. They are very focused on control, reputation, and long term brand image. They realize what is at stake. I've realized negotiations when you are working with a luxury brand, they're often more nuanced and relationship driven. They believe in long term relationships. Hence, smallest of the smallest negotiations, you will find that so much effort is going into them because they do not take things for granted. They do not take things lightly. They take smallest of the smallest businesses very, very seriously. Corporate clients, well, on the other hand, they usually prioritize scale, efficiency. So both approaches have their own challenges because, of course, your approach will depend on the type of client that you are dealing with at that moment. But of course, yes, in luxury, there's often a greater emphasis on precision and, of course, protecting brand equity above everything else.
I think it just depends on the scale of luxury as a brand. And I think that also comes with the awareness that the brands may have. I'm assuming that perhaps not so luxurious brands or brands that are a bit smaller might not have the awareness or that extent of knowledge that high end or extremely well known brands have because their legal protection is something that is new to them. So, building on that, what kinds of legal challenges arise when brands claim eco friendly or sustainable practices?
When it comes to sustainability compliances, ESG compliances, they have gained importance over, say, last few years. And sustainability is no longer something that you can just go around claiming. And the worst that could happen to you is, say, is bad press. Okay. Now, I think it has evolved from becoming just a marketing buzzword to this serious legal issue. There are jurisdictions who are coming up with hard laws relating to sustainability claims, but also your soft laws. That being said, nonetheless, there are going to be repercussions now. Brands are now scrutinized for the claims that they make. And if they are vague or exaggerated sustainability claims, it can definitely expose them to not just the regulatory actions, but also reputational damage, thanks to social media. If someone catches them making a claim that is not substantiated by a proof, we see how there is a huge outcry on social media. And of course, then there is a reputational damage. There people go on asking for a boycott, and that doesn't look good for the brand. Now, the challenge is that brands, they genuinely want to do better now. But the thing is that the intent is just not enough. Okay, that is the main catch. Now, what is required for brands, signing up for these sustainability fashion lines? They need that their so-called sustainability line is backed by evidence and it needs to be aligned by regulatory standards. We have seen that happening with H&M with the conscious collection. We have seen that with Nike having this whole eco-friendly line, which later came out to be not so eco-friendly. This is where role of legal teams comes into picture. Legal teams are now getting increasingly involved at the campaign planning stage itself to ensure that sustainability messaging is not only accurate but is also defensible and compliant. I said it before and I'm going to say it again, greenwashing is no longer just a PR risk. It's now a legal one.
That sheds so much light on the tricky landscape of these brand claims. I think reputational damage is so significant to these brands, especially again with digitalization. It's so easy for a boycott to happen or something to go wrong where the brand gets scrutinized, as well as how legal teams are actually being more involved in the company and the campaign and advertisements to ensure that consumer information is being shared appropriately and is not being miscommunicated. So, looking ahead, what emerging trends or shifts do you foresee driving change in fashion and luxury law?
There are so many changes, so many shifts happening. We are definitely seeing this clear shift towards preventive legal strategy than a reactive litigation, especially like how I said about these sustainability claims. The legal teams are making sure that the brands are cautious enough from the outset and they do not go around making claims that are later called out to be false and then facing a litigation, hence a preventive strategy, then waiting for something to go off the grid and then get into a litigation and then have a strategy in place. Again, as I said, there is an increasing focus on these compliances. Then of course there is supply chain transparency as well. Now there is a lot of pressure for brands, be it fast fashion brands or be it your high end labels, to have a clear supply chain transparency. We have seen that happening with Rana Plaza tragedy, a lot of pressure built up. We have seen that happening very recently with brands like Dior and Armani, where there were claims that the bags are actually made for the cost way less and are made by undocumented immigrants who are not treated very well, who are not paid very well, who have been working in filthy working conditions, right? So it is very, very important now for all these parties into the industry to have a clear supply chain. And also now there is digital enforcement, right? And not only that, the rise of the creator economy, as we have already discussed, has also made contracts and IP ownership, I would say, more complex and more important. That goes without saying. Then I would say that another major area is definitely technology, right? We have AI generated designs, we have digital fashion, we have online marketplacing that are raising now so many new questions about ownership, about enforcement. So I believe that fashion law today is becoming more and more interdisciplinary, blending IP, technology, consumer protection, and now even regulatory compliances.
Those insights really illustrate how dynamic and multifaceted this field of fashion and luxury law is. And I think lawyers are also realizing this trend shift and are kind of taking into account more preventative measures for the brand, as well as incorporating a blend of different fields of law. So it's not just one field of law, but it's rather that they're learning to adapt to fashion law as a whole. So, as we come to a close, what advice would you give to aspiring lawyers and law students wanting to work in this field?
See, my biggest advice would be to build strong fundamentals first. Fashion law is rooted in IP and contracts. So, understanding those areas are it's deeply essential. It's also important to understand business side of fashion. I always say, as a professional working into this field, you cannot work in vacuum. You cannot just be bothered by working onto the legal side of it. You will not be able to give your 100% until and unless you also understand business side of fashion, how the brand operates, how money flows, and where risks arise. I say that this field is a multidisciplinary field when it comes to the legal side of it. Of course, there is IP, there's contract, there's labor laws, there's environmental laws, there are advertising compliances, there is tech, there's so much. But when we talk about business side of the field, it's a niche area. And niche takes time to build. It's not about chasing glamour. I have seen people coming to me solely interested into the field because of the glamour side of it. As we have established in on during our conversation beforehand, there is so much more to this field than just glamour or labels. So don't be influenced only by the glamour, only by the labels, but about developing credibility and some practical expertise. If you focus on learning the industry and delivering real value, I swear opportunities will flow naturally. So that would be my advice to all the aspiring lawyers who actually want to build their practice into this field.
That's really applicable guidance. And I think the most significant thing is to blend your law knowledge with your knowledge of the business. And overall, this will help kind of develop a more credible profile for you as a lawyer, I guess, and then also expose you to the various facets of this ever changing field. So thank you so much for your time, Ms. Kumar. And to all my listeners, court is now adjourned until next time with the fine print.